play it any louder, then it's getting shut down.
My name is Waffles, and I'm a government whistleblower turned political commentator, and this is the last 24 hours in the news. Today is December 4th, 2025. It is 8:30 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. Here are the top U.S. news highlights for the past 24 hours. Unlawful prosecutor appointments challenged. A major legal battle intensified in New York as State Attorney General Letitia James went to a federal court hearing to challenge the authority of John Sacrone, the acting U.S. Attorney for Northern New York. James argues Sacrone was unlawfully appointed and is seeking to quash subpoenas issued by him as part of a Justice Department investigation into regulatory lawsuits James filed against Donald Trump and the National Rifle Association. This is the latest in a series of successful legal challenges. Just last week, federal judges ruled that the administration's handpicked, unconfirmed prosecutors for New Jersey, Eastern Virginia, Nevada, and Los Angeles were serving unlawfully, including the ruling that led to the dismissal of indictments against James and former FBI Director James Comey. Costco sues over tariffs. Warehouse retail giant Costco's lawsuit demanding a full refund of import duties paid under the administration's executive tariff orders continues to move through the courts. The case challenges the president's authority under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, IEEPA, arguing he is imposing taxes without congressional approval. Well, that's a good argument. But yeah, Donald Trump is now targeting a new section of law outside of IEEPA. It's like section 200 something to try and impose tariffs now. So while the whole IEEPA thing is being handled, we need to still keep an open eye on any further tariff situations. But yeah, that's going down in flames right now. Flood of habeas petitions. Federal courts in Texas and other border states are experiencing a flood of habeas corpus petitions from immigration attorneys challenging the administration's new policy that expands mandatory detention for undocumented immigrants. Lawyers are successfully using the recently passed Laken-Riley Act, which requires detention for accused criminals, to argue that the administration's broader policy of mandatory detention for all undocumented immigrants is legally inconsistent. Threat of military strikes on sovereign nations in a public cabinet meeting. President Trump escalated his rhetoric on drug trafficking, warning that any country he claims is producing drugs destined for the U.S. is vulnerable to a military attack. He specifically reiterated a threat that military strikes on land targets inside Venezuela would start very soon. This is, while we've got people in Venezuela who have been driving fishing boats in the area complaining about these shootings being having an impact on their families because loved ones have gone missing. And these are boats that don't have enough gas to even get to the United States. So why are they getting shot? And how are they trafficking drugs to the United States when they don't even have enough gas to get here because the boat's too small? Escalating threats against congressional members. President Trump's previous calls for 6 Democratic lawmakers who urged military members to reject illegal orders to be arrested and put on trial, and his subsequent post suggesting the charge was punishable by death continues to have serious security consequences. Michigan Senator Elissa Slotkin confirmed her secretary detail remains 24/7 Capitol Police protection due to the influx of hundreds of threats following the president's statements. Threat to withhold food aid to citizens. Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins publicly threatened to suspend food stamps, SNAP, assistance funding to the most Democratic-led states. That's discriminatory. Like, before we even hit the courts on this one, I just want to say that is discriminatory practice by a federal agency. And discrimination when it comes to the distribution of government services is an unacceptable thing to be doing. So then when it comes to this, that just reading the situation itself, that you are going to deny food stamps to people in democratic states, that is discriminatory. Discrimination when it comes to public services is blatantly illegal. So it's already dead in the water, however, but that does not speak to whether or not these idiots are going to actually try to implement it. They're losing a shit ton of court cases. But yeah, technically, legally, they cannot do that. That is discrimination. During the cabinet meeting, President Trump publicly referred to Somali immigrants as garbage that should be sent back as part of a xenophobic rant while discussing enforcement efforts targeting the community in Minnesota. New public charge rule risk to citizen well-being. The Department of Homeland Security, DHS, is moving forward with a new public charge regulation that would rescind the 2022 rule and provide immigration officers with broad discretion to deny visas or green cards based on the use of any type of public benefit, including non-cash assistance like Medicaid and CHIP. Chilling effect. Analysts warn this policy will cause a severe chilling effect leading to the disenrollment of potentially up to 1.8 million U.S. citizen children from Medicaid or CHIP as their immigrant parents withdraw from the programs out of fear, jeopardizing their immigration status. DHS itself acknowledged the rule may lead to worse health outcomes and increased use of emergency rooms for immigrant families. The administration announced the fact sheet for the reset of corporate average fuel economy, CAFE, standards for vehicles. This is a major regulatory reversal intended to make it easier for automakers to produce and sell gas-powered cars and trucks. Tariffs on trucks and parts imposed. A new proclamation is now in effect imposing 25% tariffs on imports of medium and heavy-duty trucks and truck parts and a 10% tariff on imports of buses as an incentive for domestic production. China tariff reductions. Following recent talks, the U.S. and China confirmed a set of mutual tariff reductions and trade barrier suspensions that took effect in mid-November, with China terminating additional tariffs on a range of U.S. agricultural products and the U.S. reducing tariffs on certain Chinese imports. China tariff reductions. Following recent talks, the U.S. and China confirmed a set of mutual tariff reductions and trade barrier suspensions that took effect in mid-November, with China terminating additional tariffs on a range of U.S. agricultural products and the U.S. reducing tariffs on certain Chinese imports. And diplomacy on Ukraine peace plan. U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff and advisor Jared Kushner held a high-level 5-hour meeting in Moscow with Russian President Vladimir Putin to discuss a revised Ukraine peace plan, a major diplomatic step that was widely reported in U.S. media. Under the radar news, Supreme Court upholds Texas redistricting maps. The Supreme Court issued a highly consequential emergency ruling allowing Texas to use its newly drawn congressional maps for the upcoming 2026 elections, overturning a lower federal court's finding that the maps were likely racially gerrymandered. This ruling will immediately impact the March primaries and the 2026 midterm elections, potentially securing several Republican seats in the U.S. House. Critics argue the court's decision effectively greenlights partisan and racial gerrymandering in the nation's second most populous state. USCIS slashes work authorization periods, policy shift, and risk to well-being. The U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, USCIS, announced an immediate cut to the maximum work authorization periods for certain classes of non-immigrants and asylum seekers, reducing the typical maximum duration from 2 years to just 1 year. This regulatory change is expected to dramatically increase the burden on both employers and immigrants by requiring more frequent, costly, and lengthy reapplication processes. Advocacy groups warn it creates significant economic instability for legal workers and increases the risk of labor shortages in sectors reliant on these workers. Grand jury refuses a second indictment of Letitia James. A major legal setback for the Justice Department occurred when a grand jury in Virginia refused to issue a second indictment against New York Attorney General Letitia James. This follows a previous indictment that federal judges have already thrown out, deeming the U.S. attorney who brought the charges to be unlawfully appointed. The refusal to indict a second time essentially halts the administration's attempt to use the federal legal system to politically target James, who has brought several high-profile lawsuits against the president and his businesses. Genesis' mission and the push for AI dominance. Policy and institutional power. Influential policy papers are circulating in Washington, D.C. and defense circles outlining a push for a major centralized government effort dubbed the Genesis Mission. Sorry, I had a chat room audio on. The proposal calls for the U.S. to treat its investment in artificial intelligence AI as a second Manhattan Project, demanding radical centralization of compute resources and a massive infusion of public funds to ensure American technological leadership and security. The plan would require unprecedented coordination across defense, science, and private sectors. The private FDIC delays key consumer protection rule for banks, consumers, and financial watch. Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, FDIC, issued a final rule delaying the compliance date for insured banks to display the official FDIC digital sign on their digital deposit-taking channels and ATMs. The deadline was pushed back from March 2026 to January 2027. While presented as a measure to reduce regulatory burden on community banks, consumer watchdogs criticized the delay, arguing it hinders consumer protection and transparency regarding federal insurance coverage, especially as a digital banking and new forms of cryptocurrency-linked deposits become more common. This concludes our U.S. news report for today. I'm going to go now. Bye.
So the Olympics is great. And Johnny, for the others, the World Cup, Johnny is the head of it. We had our top people, Wasserman. They all came in on the Olympics, and then I saw Johnny. And we got the World Cup, too. And, it's only because they rigged the election that I'll be your president representing you there. I got both of them. I got the Olympics, and I got the World Cup. And I said, it's too bad. One was in 2026, and the other was in 2028. And I said, I won't be there. I won't be your president. But then they rigged the election, and now we won, so I'm going to be your president for the Olympics and for the World Cup. So, Johnny, thank you for the World Cup, and everybody, thank you for the Olympics. We're going to have a great time.
Hey guys, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and comment on my videos. And also, don't forget to check out my shop where you could get this awesome Real Patriots Punch Nazis t-shirt. America, fuck yeah! And if you go to the link tree in my bio on most platforms, it's got links to everything, all of my stuff. You can find my shop there. I'm on eBay. You can also get this cool Exterminate MAGA sticker, because MAGA's fucking cockroaches. And fuck MAGA. Abolish MAGA. Fuck you, MAGA.